Hey, it's Guy Raz here, and welcome to The Great Creators. This is where I bring you conversations with some of the most incredible artists and actors and musicians on planet Earth. And my guest today is Cody Jinks, a man who went from heavy metal to becoming one of the most successful independent country artists of our time.
The song comes first. That comes from the artist. The artist is usually the last one paid.
Cody went from waiting tables, being a bouncer, even driving a forklift, to going platinum with a single Loud and Heavy, all without the support of a record label. It's an amazing creative and business story. So without further ado, here's my conversation with singer-songwriter and independent country artist, or should I say songwriter-singer, Cody Jinks. It's so interesting because I want to talk to you about this a little later because I know you think very deeply about the business of music because it's a business. I mean, there are band members to take care of. There are roadies and the crew. And so you got to generate revenue. And part of that is scale and volume and doing a lot of shows.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot. It really is. I employ 30 people. And, for everybody, like you just mentioned, the road guys and the office people, the warehouse people that sell our merchandise, our marketing people that, sit behind screens all day. There's a lot that goes into it. I had my Monday morning meeting this morning which was yesterday, but we were a day late on that, but we have to test the markets and see what's going on, and it's a lot.
Do you have like a chief of staff, like an operations head that kind of runs the business?
Kind of. Ultimately, I make all the decisions, but I have a staff of really 5, but there's 4 with me on the call every Monday. We really make decisions collectively because these people are in charge of my day-to-day business, my tour management side of it, my marketing side of it, and my record label side of it. So we all have to coordinate and work together and make sure the right hand knows what the left hand's doing. We're still a very, very small operation, but we're doing really big things within the market right now. And
you're like managing other artists. I just think you're so smart in how you're thinking about this because sorry to interrupt. I've been reading about you, and you mentioned Wow in the World, which is it's a business. I mean, we have a kids media company, but my main show that most people know me for is called How I Built This, which is about entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And so, I profile everyone, from Howard Schultz to the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, and so I'm really interested in this model that you're talking about, and in particular, you're in a unique place, a little bit like me, which is you're the product and you're the head of the company. And so you're diversifying by, bringing on other artists and managing them because, but you've got the added pressure of being the thing that generates the revenue, plus you've got to manage the whole company. There's a lot of pressure on you. And I get it.
Yeah, it's a lot because I have to wear different hats and learn how and when to take them off and put them on. So there's the songwriter side, which is what I am first and foremost. That's the most important thing. That's what I'm a singer-songwriter first. I'm a husband and father first, but I'm a singer-songwriter. The business comes after that, but I've had to learn, and most of my people have been with me. Most of my people have been with me for a long time. It's not uncommon to hear somebody going on their 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th, 18th year with me. I make a lot of mistakes, but I have a really good group of people that say, hey, what if we tried it like this? And so we work really well together, but like I was saying, taking the hats off, doing the songwriter thing, and then doing the business thing. And then, okay, we need to talk about, tour bus things, and I have to go and learn about that. I have to learn about everything, the record company thing, part of it. I had to learn about that. By nature, artists aren't great business people, but I've had to learn a lot and learn to wear a lot of different kind of hats.
Yeah, and to that point, artists aren't great business people because they tell themselves that. I don't think inherently they're not, but what ends up happening is they just trust the labels or they trust the agents or the managers. In your case, you are all those things. For most artists, they trust it and then they get screwed over, right? And that's what ends up happening in a lot of cases.
Unfortunately, yeah. Artists are, in my world, so I'll speak to that, is the song comes first.
Yeah.
So the song comes first. That comes from the artist. The artist is usually the last one paid. And oftentimes the least paid. And record labels over the last 100 years, have done a really good job of disguising how we're going to just screw you a different way. There's lots of different terminologies they use right now. One is called the 360 record deal. It's not only did we just change the name of how we're screwing you in more different ways now. So, learning things like that and having been offered a developmental deal by a really big label when I was 27 and realized how horrible it really was. I've been fortunate. It's been hard oftentimes, and I was poor. My wife and I were poor for a very long time, but it's been worth it.
Cody, I saw an interview that you gave, I don't know how long ago, and I was just I love that you were wearing a Joy Division T-shirt on that in that interview because that's my I grew up in the late 80s and 90s, and so that in Southern California. So that was my world. So I confess, and I've interviewed many dozens of country singers over the years, but I confess it's not like the natural place that I know the best. And a couple months ago, I was in Las Vegas, as you do, and I went and saw a Garth Brooks show. And obviously, not just one of the biggest country stars of all time, but one of the biggest singers, full stop, in history. And I've been to hundreds of concerts in my life, and that ranks up near the top 5. And I didn't know most of the songs. And what I loved about it so much was the energy of the crowd, the kindness, the joy, the camaraderie. It was absolutely amazing. And it really kind of, I don't know. Because I grew up in like L.A. I grew up in a different world, and it was like this amazing experience. And I found something that I hadn't really experienced before for the first time.
Well, you're watching one of the best to ever walk onto a stage when you're going to a Garth show. There's entertainers, and then there's Garth Brooks, and then there's Metallica, and then there's Taylor Swift, and then there's Madonna, and then there's Jay-Z. So you have like the regular world where most of us are, and then you have those guys and girls. But
it wasn't just him; it was everyone there.
But because they know what they're going to get when they go to a Garth Brooks show, they know that he's liable to hook on a harness and go fly through the stadium. They know that he's probably going to shoot up through the floor with fire behind him. They know that he is going to play probably 30 of their favorite songs ever recorded.
Yes. He played for 3 hours. He didn't do any of the other stuff. He'd be shooting out of cannons or anything. But anyway, it was a special experience. And I know that you've got this, these experiences that you see when you perform live. We're going to get into that, but I do want to back into this a little bit because your life story is absolutely amazing. I mean, you may not feel that way, but having read about you and, discovered that really, you grew up in Texas and, sort of working class family, and you did not come from a musical family. I mean, I think your dad played a little bit, right? He taught you a couple chords on the guitar as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the majority of my upbringing is as far as learning how to sing. My dad sang a lot. My dad wasn't a very good guitar player. He used to beat around a little bit in some of the bars, and never really kept a band together or anything like that. But my mom and dad both sang. we sang in church when I was a kid. We went. I grew up in the Church of Christ, and the Church of Christ is a cappella, no instrumentation. So,
Wow.
that.
So you had to learn how to use your voice as an instrument.
Well, not only that, I had to learn how to listen to other people sing, and if they couldn't sing where I was, then I needed to learn how to join them, which was difficult for me because I'm an atypical lead singer. It's difficult for me to sing anything other than what I sing. But on the flip side of that, our longtime bass player, Josh, we've been playing together almost 20 years. He also grew up in the Church of Christ, but he can match me. So we always had really, really great harmonies because of our upbringing, bringing and singing in church.
You grew up not too far from Fort Worth, as you mentioned. Family was really involved in the Church of Christ. You were, as a kid, expected and went to church every Sunday?
Yes, most of them. Dad was a back row Baptist. Dad was liable to show up to church with last night's whiskey still on his breath, and consequently, I've done the same. But but Mom made sure us kids were in church most of the time. We needed to be there, and fortunately, that experience for me as a whole with that group of people at that place and time was one of the greatest things. And I've met and still continue to talk to some of the greatest people from that time in my life.
So tell me about singing in church. I mean, were you formally part of the choir?
We didn't have like a church choir per se that sang like we wore the robes and sat over here every Sunday.
Yeah.
We had a competition choir, and we would go and just sing with other choirs, and it was a kid thing, and you'd win a gold, silver, or bronze, and stuff like that. And it was fun. It was all good stuff, and that's really how I learned, and I still use a lot of the techniques. I had our choir instructor, his name was Dennis Faulkner, and if he ever hears this, Dennis would be much older now, he'd be in his 60s, but I need to tell him that I still do the diaphragm exercise that I learned when I was a kid that I thought then was the dumbest thing I had ever seen or heard in my life. It's where you get a big breath of air and you put your hands on your diaphragm and you go, ho, 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 and it looks ridiculous, but here we are 35 years later.
I'm curious because, you're in Texas, and growing up in Texas, high school football is a big deal. Like there's and I wonder, like, how did you get into singing at church? With like, were you comfortable doing it? Did you ever think, oh, this is not cool, or to the contrary, you actually really dug it and were happy to do it?
I loved it. I never was a soloist. I always sang with the other kids. I never was the standout singer. I wasn't good enough to be the standout singer, really, frankly, at that time. I've never been the best singer. I'm still not. But I enjoyed it. I didn't think that that's what I would be doing. I played high school football. I know how big that is, especially, here in the South and in Texas in particular. I didn't think I was going to be a football player. I wasn't big enough. I didn't think that I was at first I thought I would probably be an actor when I was little, more before I would be a front man in a band. But by the time I was in high school, I think it was pretty clear what direction that was headed.
So you mentioned your dad, and I read that your dad, as a kid, he taught you to play a little bit of guitar, some chords, some music by Lefty Frizzell, who he was really into, and you guys were really into. So country music, clearly, that was like sort of the background soundtrack to your life. But you kind of gravitated, and this is not odd, because this is the time, and you grew up in this is the late '80s, early '90s. You gravitated towards metal, right? Towards heavy metal, and you were getting really into it. What were you listening to as a teenager?
I did. Country was and still is my first love. Mom listened to, if Dad was home, it was all country. If Mom was home, there was a lot more rock and roll, a lot of Elton John, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I became a teenager, Metallica was at their height. I was
Yes.
a fan of the Big Four, and if you're into thrash metal, which was derived from punk, which is exactly how my DIY mentality is a punk or thrash metal kind of way of doing things. Just hey, we're going to do it our way, and that's that's really how I geared it, and I don't really know if that answered that question. Did it?
Yeah, no, it did. It did. It's you just gravitated towards
Yeah,
loud. Yeah.
it just was, it was around me. It's how I felt at the time. And I was still playing Lefty Frizzell songs, but just Metallica and Pantera was making sense to me at the time.
That in terms of like your musical, I don't know, evolution, right? I mean, as a kid, you're experimenting. Were you developing your abilities to play the guitar? Were you did you, I mean, and was it evolving into more of a metal sound?
I'm an awful guitar player at first. I'm what in the music you call a strum and dummy. I can sit there and play an acoustic guitar. I was pretty good with my right hand, and in metal and punk, if you have a fast right hand, you can be serviceable. I was never a lead guy. I was never flashy. I'm a decent rhythm guy. I am not a big threat on the guitar, but I can play rhythm just fine, and that's really all I needed to do. But I found that writing country songs in the vein of how I would write a punk or a metal song has kind of served me in. It's not a typical way to do it. I don't guess. I mean, chords are chord, keys are keys, but I have kind of more of an aggressive style on the country guitar, I think, from my influence and that other stuff.
Um, you started writing like literally writing songs as a kid, little kid. And that I think that was something that you did on your own. Was it when you wrote songs? Did you keep them to yourself? Was it like a diary, or would you write a song and sing it for somebody?
No, I would sing them. My dad still has a cassette tape that I made of a recording of myself from probably 1985, 1986. I would have been 5 or 6. And I was singing a song off the top of my head that I was singing to my baby sister. It's called I Love My Sister. And so little kid songs, stuff like that. But I would definitely sing my songs for you. I would probably perform them for you too. But he tried to get me to play guitar, but I was more interested in the writing aspect of it when I was a kid. I did a lot of things to get sent to my room. And when I got sent to my room, there wasn't anything that Mom would tell me to read a story or write a story, read a book or write a story. And I think that that's where I got my writing from. So I would sometimes write songs, and then I would ultimately not be in trouble anymore. And I would sing to my mom and dad the songs that I had written while I was in trouble. Usually not about being in trouble. It was some little kid thing, but yeah, I always remember writing songs.
I know that after you finished high school, you ended up staying around in the area in Fort Worth, and I think it was around this time where you joined a band, which eventually became the band called Unchecked Aggression, which is like a thrash metal band. And this was the first time I think the first time you were in a band and a lead singer of a band.
That band really got serious after high school. Whenever the
Because these guys, I think it was Gary Burkham and Anthony Walker. These guys were high school friends.
Gary Burkham was a high school friend, 3 years my senior at that time. Ben Heffley and Gary were the same age. Anthony was a year or two younger than me and lived over in Arlington, about 35 minutes from where we lived. So we were, at that time, when I graduated, Anthony would have been 17. We would have had a 17 and 8, or 16 and 18 and 20 or 21-year-olds. And 97 was when that band really started playing around town. Dallas Fort Worth still has a really good heavy scene. So yeah, we did that for a few years, man, and we put our first record out. And
yes, Massacre Begins.
The Massacre Begins,
The Massacre Begins.
You did a great job.
That is Unchecked Aggression. I looked for your music online and I couldn't find it easily.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, I'm given what I know and what I've heard and what your music sounds like today, I'm curious how would you describe Unchecked Aggression? Was it like Pantera or Metallica? I mean, what was the sound like?
I can tell you that I cringe when I listen to the vocals. The lyrics are decent, but I cringe when I hear myself singing because I was trying to be. It sounded like Metallica and Pantera. If you took Phil Anselmo and James Hetfield, I think that's what I was trying to do, which is really not a great or sustainable combination. It's totally shredded my voice. But yeah, you sound like your heroes, or you try to, at that time, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're going to become. You're trying to become whatever it is you are. So you go through those cringeworthy things, and you have to go through those things in order to come out on the other side. Had that band remained, I would have had to change my vocal style a lot.
Yeah. How did you guys, I mean, I know that you started to tour and started to gig, and I mean, you're young, you're 18, 19. I think even around that time you met your girlfriend, who's now your wife. You guys were together on and off at that time. Take me to that time in your life, sort of 2000 to 2003. What was it, always on the road with the band? Not quite, I don't know, finding, I mean, were you playing gigs to like empty rooms? Tell me what you remember about that time.
Well, Rebecca and I we started dating in 97. She went off to college after we graduated in 99, and I was driving forklifts during the day and playing music at night, and we practiced way more than we played. We really didn't tour back then because heavy metal is such a difficult market. There's not a lot of money in it. Putting a tour together is very difficult. So we played a lot around the DFW area. We branched out a little bit. We never went farther than a few hours away because we just couldn't. We were unmanaged. We were very green. We didn't have a lot going on. And what I remember that time was, Rebecca put herself through school. We were both very, very busy. She was living up in Denton at the time, going to school and working full time. And I was just working and playing music. The clubs that we played, usually they would just throw a whole bunch of punk and metal bands together, and nobody would make more than like $50 a band. But, they'd give the kids something. You could come see like 7 or 8 bands, and every band would get 15, 20, 30 minutes. And you made a lot of great friends like that. We didn't make any money, but, we were getting our feet wet.
So that was your life at the time. I mean, you were, and did you? I mean, it's interesting. You say that there wasn't really a market for metal, and I'm curious. I mean, I wonder, is that just sort of the reality that there isn't enough of a market to tour even small venues around the country to sustain a band, a small band?
There is a market. It's a small market, and I hate that for so many of the bands out there because there's, and I know a lot of guys in metal bands, and unless you're one of the bigger ones, it is very, very tough, to sustain a comfortable living, to be in something better than a white van. Not that there's anything against those, man. I've been in my share of white vans, but it's a tough market if you're not one of the big dogs. And you don't see a lot of metal bands. You see a lot of metal bands coming out. I pay attention to that. Like there's a band called Orbit Culture right now. They're from Europe, and I just got turned on to them, and turns out those guys are like country fans too. So,
Oh, cool.
I keep my eyes open. There's a lot bigger market for it in Europe, overseas. There's a huge market for it in America too. But I've known guys in metal bands that were playing, 200, 300, 400 people over here and going overseas and playing for 9 or 10,000.
Wow. Yeah. Did you, being the front man, even though you were a small band, right? How did you, and you mentioned, and this is normal. When you start in your career, you kind of ape the style or the sound of your heroes. I mean, we all do this in any kind of public-facing job. And I wonder how you kind of start to figure out how to be a front man. Like, would you get on stage and just hold the mic and sing? Did you know what to do, how to move? How did you, embody what you thought that was supposed to be?
Well, I had a really horrible mishmash of what I thought I was supposed to do based on who I thought looked the coolest doing it. So, I was trying to sing like James Hetfield and Phil Anselmo mashed together, which was not great. I tried to do this really cool move where it's like a jump thing with your legs, doing that like Scott Ian from Anthrax. Working on the power poses in the mirror, which, I don't know. I was a kid back then and I was really trying to figure it out. I had a good time trying to do it. But ultimately, I think that after 2003, whenever that band broke up, which was a huge, I thought that was going to be my forever band. I really did. And I was really, really bummed. And I hadn't played an acoustic guitar in like 6 or 7 years at that point. And I traded in my amplifier. I had a Mesa Boogie half stack. So a big, loud, amplifier cabinet situation, and bought a low-end Martin, one of their first attempts at a composite body, called a DCX-1E, and great little guitar for the money. And it's all I could afford after I came back to Texas broke from LA. And I guess I forgot that. We went to LA for like 2 months. It's really not important. We didn't do anything except for break up while we were out there. So I get back and I was going through all these because I was like such a loser. I was 23 and my wife was about to graduate college and she was about to start her career in education. And I wasn't a loser because of what I was doing. I was a loser because of what I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. When we got married, I was waiting tables at a Bennigan's restaurant. It's kind of like a TGI Fridays or an Applebee's.
Sure. Yeah.
I was waiting tables at a Bennigan's and I was working the door at a place called the White Elephant Saloon in the stockyards of Fort Worth. Being a bouncer, that's probably the smallest bouncer in the history of Fort Worth stockyards. But that's what I was doing, and just trying to be around music and hang. And so I didn't even really mean to write country songs. I just grabbed that acoustic guitar and country songs started coming out. And then I guess I'm a country singer. And I didn't even know if I could sing country music. I really didn't. I had never tried. And after my voice healed from years of screaming, I kind of had this really whiskey soaked, kind of raspy cigarette. Well, I drank a lot of whiskey and smoked a lot of cigarettes type of thing too, but had that thing going and really started working on how to sing and how to sing country, not sing choir songs or metal songs or, And
this would be different because you were in a band, as you say, it was going to be your forever band.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys had, I think, a difficult split, right? It was not
it was ugly. Yeah. It was ugly.
Yeah. Do you keep in touch with any of those guys?
No. Yeah. Sadly enough, I don't. I did for a while, but as things happen, man, people grow up and have babies and move on, and obviously, I wish everybody the best, and hopefully, everybody remembers everything fondly except for the end.
And that could have been sort of the end of your career as a musician. I mean, you could have, who knows, moved on but it sounds like you were, because you took some time off, I know, after that. But it sounds like you were still committed to this dream of making a living off music.
Yeah, at that point I was 23 and I was really starting over. I'd been in a band for 7 years. And I mean, we were good. We weren't great. We were good, but
Yeah.
I had to start over. I didn't walk onto a stage for a year and a half. I finally started going to open mic nights and playing a bunch of the country bars and around north side of Fort Worth. And I had a bar owner there at the Longhorn Saloon years and years ago, former owner, that gave me every Friday night in order to build my band and my show. And we got paid $300 for a 4-piece. So I was the guy that didn't get paid, but I was playing and I was learning how to keep them on the dance floor. I grew up listening to honky tonk music, which is what I am. Honky tonk is nothing but a culmination of country, rock and roll, and rhythm and blues. It's all of it. You can take it. It was like this back then, and it was like this now. Sometimes we would have to know how to play. You drop us in a blues bar, we could do it. You could drop us in a country bar, we could do it. Hell, drop us in a rock and roll bar, we could get through it.
Yeah.
We could do anything, and we still can. So I was learning. I learned a great deal in about a 3-year period then, and my band was pretty much on the road after that.
I know you describe yourself as a songwriter, singer, and I want to ask about that in a moment. But, the previous record you had released at this point was called The Massacre Begins.
Yeah.
And then at 26, you release your first solo album, your country album, which was called Collector's Item.
Yeah.
So help me understand, what were your song lyrics like for The Massacre Begins versus a country song for Collector's Item? Were they that different?
Yes and no. Thematically, a lot of the songs were, heavy metal and punk is a lot of anti-establishment songs of war and hard, bad times, ugly times, and songs are songs.
Yeah.
It's a different way to write them. I still write heavy stuff. I still write metal songs, and I love it, and I always will. They're just different. I find I can get a little deeper with metal songs. You can get deep and dark, and anything can be heavy, but you can really, I feel like in a lot of ways say more in metal, or maybe not say more, but just make it really, really obvious how bad your disdain is for something. It just sounds angrier, I guess, if the music's heavy.
When you started to perform as a quote unquote country singer, right? You're 26, and from age 17 or 16 to 23, you were performing as a metal artist. Did you feel, in a sense, that what you were doing as a country singer was actually more authentic to who you were than what you were doing as a metal singer?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer because I'm still both. I'm still the metalhead, and I'm still the kid that grew up in the honky tonks. Really, my mom and dad used to take me to. My mom and dad met in a honky tonk bar. They used to go dancing in when I was little, and they would make me sit to bars. I went to bars when I was a kid. They would make me sit at the table. I'd get a coloring book, and they'd order me a Shirley Temple with some extra cherries, and I would sit there, and they would dance. That's what they did.
Yeah.
So that's how I grew up. So I'm still that guy. I'm still the metal guy too, but I've found that your old school country stuff, if you really want to take a look back and track your lineage, if you look at guys like Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins and Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis was your first punk.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what that guy was doing. And now,
he was punk. Yep.
Now all of those guys made country records, gospel records, and rock and roll records. I'm not doing anything different. And those were the best of the best. And it didn't matter if it was a country song or a rock and roll song.
But you had to build, I mean, I don't think you had a huge following with Unchecked Aggression, but you had a following. Now you're recreating yourself, even though it was authentic to who you were, right? A country singer, also metal singer, but now you've got the public has no idea who you are at this point, and you've got to build an audience as a country singer at 26.
Yeah.
Tell me how did you start to do that? I mean, first of all, you made a record. Did you have a label deal at that point?
No, I didn't. I was late to the game too, really starting at 26. I was behind the 8 ball in that regard.
Because you got to go to Nashville when you're like 18.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what they say. But, the Texas red dirt scene down here, I wasn't really a part of either because I was probably too one way or another for them. And I really wasn't the Nashville thing either. I really have always done my own thing. So where I was late and kind of behind the 8 ball was, it did seem like I was getting a late start. And the first 2 records I did when I was 26, I did Collector's Item. And then I think when I was 28, I did the Cast No Stones record, which neither one of those are in print anymore. I didn't know how to sing like me on those records. I hadn't figured that out yet. I guess I'm a late bloomer.
Can you give me? I'm just curious because I mean, if you're comfortable, what did you sound like then?
It was probably a mishmash of. I'm going to give you a lot. You can mash this all up. There were a lot of Merle Haggard, George Strait, probably some Garth Brooks, Keith Whitley, Randy Travis. I love the deep baritone guys, but I loved a lot of what Garth did with his voice, and took a couple of things from him as well. But the older I've gotten, the more I've settled into how I sing, and it was through singing really badly and not knowing how to sing like myself for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the natural progression of any artist, where you're working through how to find who you are, right? Like your authenticity is an overused word, I think, but it is the best word in this example. Like you get to a point where you're like, yeah, that actually is me. That's Cody Jinks. This is who I am. It takes time.
It's taken my whole life. And what that means is, it's taken the band that is together now. My sound, the Cody Jinks sound, is because of Josh and Chris and Dave and Drew and Hot Rod and Jake. The band is my sound. Oftentimes in country music, you don't hear the same guys playing the songs on stage as you did hear recorded. They have session musicians, and then they'll have the recording band, and then they'll have their live band. And I don't do that. The guys, when you hear our record, you hear our guys playing, and so that's a part of our sound. That's why I sound the way I do.
When you before you got you put the band together and you basically went out on the road, I read that there were times early on where you played like 3-4 people at a bar or a venue.
I remember the first time I played Madison, Wisconsin, which is a long way from Fort Worth, Texas. There were 4 people. So there were literally as many people on the stage as there were in the crowd, and there still wasn't a total of 10 people in the room.
That would have been 2006. And could you have imagined that 10 years later, you'd have a top 4 Billboard country album?
That would have been a little later than 6, but no, it happened. Being an overnight success takes a long time.
It's overnight success at 20 years work, right?
I can tell you, by the time I finally hit, when I was, people were like, when did you know? And I said, I was 36, 37 years old when I knew that I was going to be doing this, at least as a living. I knew I'd be doing it for a living, but as far as making my living and being able to know that that was going to be there. Music was my living. I was 36, 37.
Yeah, because the first, I mean, as you say, well into your 30s, you were making music, you're performing, but it wasn't enough to earn a living.
Not until my wife and I were six figures in debt until we were 35. We broke even at 35. And at 36, I started making a profit. By 37, I knew we were going to be good. So quite literally, we've been married 20 years this year, and still the majority of our time together, we have been by definition poor.
It's amazing. I mean, 36, I think, that was when you released "I'm Not the Devil."
Yes.
Huge breakthrough record for you at the time. And that it's interesting because that, I imagine, a lot of people probably were like, "Who is this guy? Cody Jinks came out of nowhere."
Yeah.
Did you hear
They're
that?
still saying that too. It's really funny. I'm still getting that. Yes, it was happening. Yeah, where did this guy come from? Oh, he's 37. He's been doing this for however long. But yeah, like I said, man, I was a late bloomer, I guess.
Sort of walk me through your songwriting process, because I alluded to this earlier, but I've seen you refer to yourself as a songwriter-singer, not singer-songwriter. First of all, why that distinction?
I think I'm a better songwriter than I am a singer.
You're a great singer. I mean,
thank you.
I'm not just saying that because you're.
No, I'm not fishing.
I would tell you if I didn't think that, but you were a great singer. So I'm just curious.
I appreciate that very much. I'm a decent enough singer to get by. The art of the song is the most important thing to me. Being a wordsmith is the most, what I do, the most admirable thing as I see it in any part of this business is being the songsmith. That's the reason this whole business exists. I want to be one of the ones that is, helping the art of songwriting. Not that the world needs me, but any artist would really love to know that they're contributing to a movement that is not really that old. You go back to the 1920s and then you have Jimmy Rogers, and that's when you really started having your first country music superstar, recording artist, stuff like that. We're only looking at 100 years of this. So the music and the business is still changing and evolving, and that's really, really what I'm trying to do and focus more on now. On the business side of it, I'm still trying to change the record business as a whole, but the songwriting is first. The song is the most important thing. Being a better songwriter is what that's what I want to do. I want to be great at that.
Well, let's sort of, if you don't mind, break down this idea of songwriting for a moment, and because I'm curious where you reach for ideas. Like a good example is "Loud and Heavy." This is one of your best known songs. It's an amazing track, and I hear in that song somebody expressing bouts of anxiety. I hear. Sorry, keep going. Tell me about what bad news for it's hard to sleep when I'm shaking. The dark days find a way. I'm reading those lines and I'm thinking, this is somebody who's expressing some inner angst.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always had that. I've always been anxious. I've always been a high anxiety case, I guess, classification. And it's gotten better the older I've gotten. I've learned to manage that. But yeah, high anxiety. I can remember at that particular time, which that's almost 10 years ago, I wrote that. But I can remember a couple of things personally that were going on.
Because you wrote this before you were financially secure
Yeah.
and all these things. Yeah.
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 Yeah. We were still,
And that song's gone, I think that song's gone platinum
it's,
since.
it's rounded double platinum. It's on its way to
Wow.
triple platinum, I think. So,
Amazing.
yeah, but, my son was 2 the day I wrote that. It was my son's second birthday, and there was a lot going on, and I was very much at a time in my life where I was trying to figure out what my next move was, because my wife was working as a teacher back then, and I was on the road over 200 days a year with my wife having to manage a 2.5-year-old, or I'm sorry, yeah, at that time it would have been a 4.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so she called herself a DIY mom. She didn't say single mom because she wasn't single. You know, I was sending money home, but she called herself a DIY mom. So there was just a lot going on. There was a lot going on with my family, and yeah, it was an anxious time. It was a stressful time, and the dark days find a way for everybody. And I think that that's one of the things about my writing that people really have latched on to. There's a reality and a vulnerability that you don't really get when you turn on country radio, because they know that I'm not sitting at a writer's table in Nashville at a 4:30 meeting to write about these keywords or that keywords. They know that day I was going through hell.
Is that how you? Because you mentioned that this sort of Nashville, farm system, factory system, right? And frankly, there have been a lot of great songs.
Oh
that come
yeah,
out of that
I have a
system.
lot of friends in Nashville. I love a lot of. There's a lot of great people out there.
But a lot of tracks, big popular tracks, are written by committees of people, the songwriters, including the artist. And you, I think, primarily sit down and just write.
I do. I co-write with the people I want to co-write with, and they're not a part of the machine. What often people don't realize is that, especially in country music, these big, huge record labels, they have their staff writers. And
Yeah.
so whenever you come in, they want to take you because you're great, but they want to make you everything you're not. No, this isn't for everybody. There's just most of them. The ones that really stay true to themselves, you guys like Eric Church and Luke Combs, Cody Johnson's a great example of that. Really great things coming out of Nashville in terms of guys. Those guys are hard-headed. I respect them. But they take and mold people and say, hey, you're going to sing these songs. And you're like, well, I have my own songs. And they go, well, that rocks the boat. That disrupts our staff writers, which basically means our publishing company's not going to get that cut. It's all in-house. They're all in bed together. It's all a big sham. And the record companies laugh their way to the banks because of it. So, that's one way of doing business, and it's been very lucrative for a lot of people. But most people in that business don't have the freedom of the people I just listed.
So you mentioned, at this time in your life when you wrote Loud and Heavy, one of your biggest, most successful tracks. But when you sit down now and you write, where do your ideas come from?
It's still life. I write first person the majority of the time. 95, 6, 7% of the time it's first person. Something I've gone through, something I'm going through, something I look to go through. Very rarely do I write from a different point of view. I have exercised that in the past with a song like David. Is not written first person. That song didn't happen. Those are exercises that I take sometimes, but the majority of the time I just sit down to write, and I try to finish one usually by myself. If I can't, I have a handful of very, very talented friends that I've gotten to know over the years that I will trust to help me finish songs, and vice versa. but that's really, I don't write as much as I should. I don't believe in writer's block, but I do believe I should attempt at writing more than I do, because I typically don't sit down to write unless I have an idea. And oftentimes it's just because one word attracts other words and they start kind of going around in my head. And that's the best way I can explain it. And words pick up words, and the words become sentences, and the sentences go into lines, and the lines go into paragraphs. And then I can usually set down and write a good bit of it right then. And then I put it down, and then I usually come back to it, or if I need to enlist some help, I'll do that.
As your, as your sort of career began to take off, you really moved and have always kind of operated in a very independent way. I mean, you've got I believe, your own label and your own management company,
Publishing, everything.
Publishing company.
Yeah.
I mean, you're running a significant business. You're running a business. Tell me about that model. How did that happen? I mean, because I think a lot of artists would love to do that. For many of them, it's too late. They're already, so entrenched in working with, and maybe for some of them it works, But how did you develop this kind of independent business around your music?
I can tell you that over the years, I've had a bunch of great help from a bunch of great people. It'd be unfair to say I've done this entirely by myself. I had a vision. The vision is mine. How I wanted to do everything, that was mine. How I've maintained control of my masters, my publishing, how I've maintained control of everything. I knew that would pay. That was a long-term investment that would pay dividends later. I'm much better off now being able to be financially free to run my company as I wish. And whenever somebody says, hey, Cody, can we do this? I usually go, yes, we can. It was a great help from my previous management, who helped me take this and get it almost to where it's at now. But even with my last management, I eventually felt like I'd hit a ceiling, and I felt like I wasn't able to do a lot of the fun things that I just wanted to do. And if I'm having more fun, then I've got the 30 people that work for me now are having a hell of a lot more fun too.
So how do you think about, I mean, obviously you've evolved from, a kid in sort of in the choir at the Church of Christ to heavy metal thrasher to somebody trying to figure out who he wanted to be, until you were able to kind of say, actually, I want to be me. I want to be Cody Jinks. And that took a while. It's still evolving, right? I mean, I think you're in your early 40s. And I think I read somewhere that, really, it was only in your 40s where you started to feel comfortable in the way you sounded. And I think that's really common, by the way, for a lot of people. It certainly happened with me. And so, now as somebody who's like maturing into this business and still getting bigger, and, with every album you release, it's going to get a lot of attention. How do you think sort of thematically about what you want to say and what you want people to hear in your music?
You started by saying, figure out who you are, and then ended with what you want people to hear in your music. And I am still a work in progress. I'm still trying to figure out who I am, quite frankly. And I want people to hear that in my music. I want that to be easily identifiable, because you're not that much older than I am. I looked your stuff up too. And, you may or may not agree with me, but I feel like my early 40s, and you were there not that long ago, I feel like my early 40s have been a renaissance, a little bit of an awakening.
Yeah.
and getting away from like the hard living, honky tonkin' rebel, devil may care guy, and letting people see that, hold on. So Cody Jinks is in his early to mid 40s now, and he's still trying to figure out what's going on. All right, I believe that.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, man, I'm a dad with a teenage daughter that I'm trying to navigate the world through, and still write songs that are pertaining to real life, real working class people, just real. And that's all I can do. And that's what I hope people get from it, because I'm still trying to figure out who the hell I am too.
Yeah. Do you think that you mentioned this idea that you tend to write when inspiration strikes, and I've talked to some artists who have whether they're authors or musicians, who have a habit of just getting butt in chair and writing, even if they will never use that material ever. They just sit down every day at a certain point and write. But for you, it is about waiting until the idea comes and then finding a place where you can start to work on it.
I wish I were that disciplined. I write a great deal. I keep a journal. I do music reviews for my fan club on records that I really enjoy. I'm not a critic. I don't write negative. If I don't like a record, I don't write about it. So I write a lot, and I'm working on a book right now. I'm about to finish my first book, and hopefully that goes into publication. And
Well, tell me about the book. Is it a novel?
it's, it started out, people are like, "You're going to write a memoir?" And I'm like, "No." And the further I get through it, it's like, maybe, it's not really so much a memoir. It's not really like, it's a book of how I've done what I've done, because it's never been done. And people ask me a lot how I did it. And I can really honestly say that for that one thing, I can literally write the book on it, and I can tell you how I did it. And, I'm not really, decided on a title right now. I think I've got one, but, I'm probably about 3/4 of the way through it. And, it's talking about the days from unchecked aggression, and, the decisions that I made that cost me, the gambles that I made on gambling and doubling down on myself that put me in a severe amount of debt, and betting on myself again to pull myself out, So, quite frankly, what I think about record labels and what they've done to the business, and what I think about a lot of bad managers have done for the business, and how not to do those things, and how to because it's easier now to take your own career into your hands. With social media being the way it is, you have avenues. With Spotify, there are more avenues today. It's unbelievable. You're in the same business. So, trying to point people in the right direction with this book. So I tell people now it's a memoir of how I did it. It's a book of my secrets. I'm telling my secrets. I'm not telling my story and why I'm screwed up over this or that, like memoir style. I was, whatever as a kid. No, it's, Dad was hard on me. I mentioned that in the book, but it's how I conducted my business.
And essentially that approach, right, has given you the kind of freedom that a lot of artists don't have. Like, you can put a record out, and you can just put it out, right? You can make management decisions. There are all kinds of things that you can do that you couldn't do if you weren't running your band and your essentially, which is a business, the way it's run.
Yeah, I don't have to answer to a record company. I never have. But with any manager you have or management firm you may have, and there's a lot of great managers out there. There's good record labels out there.
Yeah.
But I never was in a situation where I had an answer to a record label. If I wanted to do something, I did it, and I didn't have to say, so I could do this courtesy of whatever records. I never had that. Never went through that type of stuff. Managers will always, a good manager should ask you every day, what do you want to do today? As an artist, what do you want to do today? Most managers will ask that. Some won't, and like I said, there's a bunch of good ones, but that should be the first question. Now, managers will always, they will always resist, because they're thinking about the bottom line, and that's their job. That's what makes them good, because artists will oftentimes give themselves away. We're all guilty of that. So it's trying to find a really great compromise with that. The fact of the matter is, at this point in my career, by owning all of my publishing, all of my masters, all of my licensing, all of my trademarks, owning everything.
Wow.
I've positioned myself to do whatever the hell I want, whenever I want to do it, how I want to do it, and smile at everybody when I'm passing them by.
You have a new record out called Change the Game. Tell me what I mean, I know that you think thematically about your music and about your albums. Tell me about, because I read somewhere, I saw an interview where you kind of referenced this idea about part of this record is talking about work that you've done on yourself. And I mean, you're a really, open person. And clearly you've had a long marriage, a strong marriage, I mean, I'm sure like with any marriage there are ups and downs, but, and you talk about your inner life, right, on your songs. What are the things that you are working through that are being expressed on this record?
A lot of things that I carried with me. I started drinking heavily when I was 19, and I did until last year. And for me, and I've found that with often people that have gone through things like that, you kind of put your mind on hold, and you aren't able to. When I was 19, I should have been in therapy working through things, but I wasn't. I was drinking to fall asleep, and I got to my early 40s, and I'd been carrying all the things that made me write how I wrote and got me my fan base and the hard living, honky tonkin', hard headed, screw you kind of motif mentality, whatever bravado I was putting on.
I mean, Must Be the Whiskey, obviously another big song of yours.
Sure. And, that was with my friend Josh Morningstar, and a lot of my themes are, there was a lot of whiskey drank and a lot of drugs done back in the day. And, that was geared to hide and mask things that I hadn't addressed. And so once I cut those things out of my life and started therapy in my 40s.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, I have been much happier. I've been it's been a lot better because again, I'll say I'm a late bloomer. I'm just now dealing with some things that I should have dealt with a long time ago, but I'm happy that it's better late than never.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're described as an outlaw country singer, right? And whether that's a self-description or a description that others have of you, I think sort of our perception is like, oh, well, an outlaw doesn't go to therapy, but therapy
they should.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right? Because usually those things you're talking about, drugs, alcohol, are designed to dull pain.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people use them. It's not to be an outlaw; it's to dull pain.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what, I have a song that's on that record called The Sober Thing, and it's the lead off song. And, the chorus says, the numbing was fuel, or the numbing was fuel for running away from the pain, So I mean, you're using what numbs you as your fuel to run. And
Yeah.
I got tired of running, and I got to the point where I woke up one morning, I looked at my wife, and I said, I'm done. I drank it all. I drank every damn bit. I drank everything I could. You couldn't set anything in front of me I hadn't drank, and probably a lot of it. And I needed to put that down, and I needed to talk to people, and not just, because I always thought, I'll just get it out in my writing, and
Yeah.
people will understand it, and I'll just get it out there. That wasn't enough anymore, because I was going to start writing about the same things, and bands like that go away. There's an evolution going on with how our band sounds, and our sound is our sound, but the writing and the lyrics and the content, and we want our crowd to grow up with us.
Have you entirely given up drinking?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I put it
That's hard.
I put it down one day, and I hadn't touched a drop since. I didn't go to any treatment facilities or anything.
Wow.
I got up and I shocked the hell out of my wife, and I just said, I'm done.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Do you I'm curious, given that you grew up in the church, have you maybe returned to faith a little bit or leaned on it at all, because that can be a really powerful tool sometimes to transform your life for lots of people.
Yeah, I have. I've always been very. I haven't been a regular at a church in 20 plus years.
Yeah.
But I've always remained. Me and the good Lord we've always had a good relationship, and me and Jesus are tight. We always have been, even when I was drunk and at my worst. Jesus was there, was there with me. And you hear people oftentimes say, I'm a born again Christian, or it is. I'm not a born again Christian, man. I got washed up when I was 12 years old, and I found that I've changed my routine, and I'm trying to show my kids that you develop good habits like you develop bad habits. And my kids have been keenly aware that Dad has been trying to break some bad habits the last few years. They're not blind. They're not stupid. They're both very, very smart. You get that? You got two of your own. So they're very.
But you're open with them about it, and it means that there's that support network that can help you.
It's a support, and like I said, we don't go to church or anything, but we sit down as a family and read the Bible. We always have. Faith is an important part of our journey as a family, and even when I'm at my worst, they've always known that's a big part of me and my life, and I haven't always been the best at anything, regarding being husband or father, but I think that I've always relied on my faith to try and to be better. So I've developed better habits. And they can definitely tell that. And, I try to get up in the morning every morning. I get up real early now, and I spend some time in devotion. And before I even turn the news on, I'm a news junkie, which is horrible. That's almost as bad as drinking.
Horrible.
It's
terrible.
It's like drinking too much.
Don't watch the news anymore. I stopped watching the news.
It's not even news anymore. It's just whatever.
It's just a depressing noise, and people are mad and
it's just awful,
angry. You would think that America's coming apart if you watch the news.
Yes,
I just stopped.
I know, and I can tell you. You know what? I was in Boston and Connecticut, and I was up in the Northeast 3 weeks ago, and you know what? People up there are awesome.
Awesome.
People that aren't like me are awesome, and I just have the loveliest conversations with these New Yorkers and these people that you would think that we would be pitted against each other and just hate each other's guts. This country's got a lot of wonderful people, a lot of faithful people in it still, and that's my America.
I think that actually my theory is Americans are among the nicest, kindest people on the planet, unless they're driving. Then they're really horrible and hostile. I don't know what it is about getting behind the wheel, but man, I've seen people are just so cruel. But if you just talk to people, like you go on a road trip or something, people are really nice. People are I think, wherever they are.
I agree. I'm kind of one of those old romantics. I still believe there's more good ones than there are bad ones, and I still believe I don't believe there's good in every man, but I believe there's a little bit of good in most of them. I believe there's a little bit of good in most of them. We got a shot.
Yeah. So when by the time this airs, when people are watching it, you're going to be well into a tour.
Yeah.
And going back to the times where you're doing 200 days a year away from home, I know that's different now. But still, it is a sacrifice even to be away for 60, 70, 80 days a year. How do you sort of manage that balance now? I mean, do you make sure that you, I don't know, come home every couple of days or weeks, or how do you kind of keep that balance? Because also, and this is a bit of a sensitive topic, but you're managing sobriety, right? And you're going to be out on the road.
Yeah. It's all a balance. It's really, it's not that bad. When because I'm better equipped to do all the things now that I have to do, how I need to do them. And I'm happy. I'm happy with doing it. I'm happy with where I'm at. I'm happy being as busy as I'm being right now. After I got out of my last management, parted ways with my manager, there was a lot of things within my organization I wanted to change. There was a lot of, just like I wanted to change things within my marriage that I needed to change. And there was the change as a husband and father. But now, it's just, I'm in a happier place. So I relish the workload. I would be a waste of cocaine. I was always into downers because I get up at 6:30, 7:00, dude. And I'm like, I don't sit down until it's time to go to bed, because I've got a lot of different ventures going on that aren't even music related. Some different companies I'm getting involved with, and, some lifestyle branding type of things. Finishing the book up and juggling all that. This is a long way around to answer your question. Juggling all that and saying, I don't go longer than 8 or 10 days without coming home anymore. Mm-hmm. And my children are older. My wife retired from teaching and she homeschools them. And they can homeschool from wherever. They can homeschool on a tour bus. They can homeschool on an airplane. And we oftentimes we'll turn my tours into learning trips. And if I'm in Boston, we'll take them on the Freedom Trail and on the ride.
Awesome.
Paul Revere went on, and go see the Mayflower.
So cool. It's the best.
Yeah.
I love that.
So cool. We do those types of things. They're older now. They get it. And we enjoy it. We enjoy spending the time together. And on work days, if they're on the road with me, which isn't as much as I'd like. My wife's out a little bit more than my kids can come. But when they are out on the road with me, on a work day, I don't do anything. I wake up at 8:30, 9:00 in the morning on the bus. I have my routine. I have my coffee. I check my emails. I do business for the day. I do promo. I do press. I do PR. I'm gone. Rebecca will get up and take the kids to whatever science museum is in that town. She'll get up and take them to wherever to see whatever is in that. She knows she can tell you all the great science museums all over the country because she was a science teacher. So
now I know why they listen to Wow in the World.
That's exactly right.
Podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was thinking about I think it's a single from your new record called Outlaws and Mustangs, and so many of the lyrics that I read make so much sense to me now, knowing what I know about you from this conversation. The wisdom is often born of our scars. I think wisdom's always probably born of our scars. We pay a price for going our own way, which is, but this line that, the Mustangs and Outlaws always come home. And I mean, I don't know if you were writing that about yourself, but it does resonate with me. They always come home. And it seems like this is sort of what, it's a reflection of what's been happening internally. you always come back to center. You always come back to the place that you kind of abandoned, whether it was, because you weren't taking care of yourself, or you were, I think you used the word astray. And so it makes a lot of sense in the context of your life.
That song was a happy accident in that I tried to record that song for the last record, Mercy, which came out 2 years ago. But oftentimes you'll find that certain songs don't need to make a record for certain reasons, be they whatever. Like Ray Charles says, the song's going to do what the song's going to do.
Yeah.
And it's your job to then place the song, do the song justice. We couldn't make it sound right for the last record. It took me 2 years to get that song, not even changing a word. And I have to credit Tennessee Jet, co-writer on that song, just brilliant writer. It took me 2 years plus to get that song, and it was as simple as changing the way I sang the first line phonetically.
Wow.
It was a phonetic change that was like, there it is. It was just one of those tiny little Bob Ross happy accidents. Like, oh, that's it right there. It's like, well, why didn't we think of that 2 years ago? But yeah, I think that you're very, very right about, coming back around. And we put a video out in that song. My real dad's in it. My real daughter's in it. And it's three generations of hardheads. And I've never liked the term outlaw, and I've always veered away from it. Waylon Jennings was the outlaw. I don't know what I'm an outlier. But I've never used it. But I think it was just fitting for this song because I fixed a lot of things within my family. Or still working on it, not just my wife and kids, but extended. And I'd like to think that we're all still trying to grow, and it just shows a different side. I think it just shows a little bit of a softer side.
Cody Jinks, congratulations on the new record, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Guy. I appreciate it, and I can tell you that my kids think I'm much cooler having been on your podcast.
Well, tell them I said hello, and good luck on the road.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, Guy. Had a great time. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching my conversation with Cody Jinks. His newest album is called Change the Game, and we will link to it on our show notes page. If you want to see more videos like this one, please do subscribe to this channel. We post new conversations every single week, and of course, we are a podcast, so you can listen to the great creators wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc., etc. Just search for the great creators, and we will see you right back here next week. I'm Guy Raz. Thanks for watching.